Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I'm going to show you a problem that exists with relatively new Penn JigMasters. The ones, this one certainly was manufactured in the last few years. It's fairly common, and I get these in my shop a lot where the reel is frozen and it doesn't turn. And there's usually a problem here with the spool gear attaching itself, freezing to the spool assembly itself. So we'll show you what it is and we'll see if we can fix it. If not, we may have to get some replacement parts. But let me just show you what to do if you encounter this problem. So the first thing you do is you want to pull off the side plate assembly. You unscrew the one screw, take apart, small twist, and yeah, that's what we have here. You can see there's a lot of rust inside the channel there, and the spool doesn't come out. So like I said, this has happened more times than I care to see in my shop. It's usually a case where somebody's fishing salt water and they don't take care of the reel. They don't hose it down after the use. The water gets back in here. There's some steel parts that just kind of freeze together. And in this case, it's the spool gear welding itself onto the spool shaft. Now whatever you do, don't pull. Don't try to pry, don't do any of that. You're just going to bend and break parts. So let's show you how to get this off first, then we'll try and show you how to remedy the situation. If we can't remedy it, then we're going to just have to get some new pieces and parts. So first thing you want to do is remove the handle. That handle is held on by a stop nut, which I've taken off already. And now we're taking off the handle screw. You'll notice that I have a protective glove on to keep the stuff out of off my skin where possible. And I also have a parts tray here where I put all my pieces and parts. Next up, we're going to go pull the handle itself. I like to do that by backing off the star adjuster. That way you don't wobble it, you don't injure that brass shaft underneath here, which is the gear sleeve. And if you just back it up, eventually it pushes it off. And then got to take the star nut off anyway, so why don't you use that for the leverage. Alright, now what we got to do is we got to remove the eccentric piece and the 4 bridge screws to get this loose. So let's start. I have a little wrench here. It's I believe it's an 8mm. Could be a little bit less, but it seems to fit that nut perfectly. So let's pull that nut off. You can also use an open end wrench if you want. Yeah, that one would fit. You can use that to turn it. But once you break it, you can generally see the case. Now, just looking at the reel, this tells me that this reel hasn't been serviced in a long time. If it hasn't been serviced, it hasn't been hosed down, it hasn't been protected against the elements, then the parts aren't going to hold up. And like I said, I've seen this too many times now. Now, these reels are used commercially. I repair reels for a fishing boat charter, and I know they just run as many days as they can run, and they don't stop to think about the reels. All they think about the reels is if it breaks, we'll go send it to me. So I can't necessarily say I fault them, but it's not the way you should be doing this if you're at home. Okay, we have the screws loose. You want to push the eccentric through, and then you should be able to remove the side plate. You can already see that's just loaded with rust and buildup and dried grease and everything that can go wrong with the reel is there. So just an example of poor maintenance. But I'll tell you what, I think we're going to get this one back together. If we don't, I have some replacement parts. I'll show you what you do as your next steps. So the first thing we want to do is clean this stuff, get all that junk off of there. I use a couple of different types of cleaners. You can use a cotton swab. In this case, this stuff is caked on. So what I'm going to do is just grab some penetrating oil. I'm just going to use it to loosen it up. I'm just going to lay it over here on the side for a moment as we get to the rest. Now this is the back end of the bridge. You normally wouldn't see that. Here's your yoke. Here's your jack. You can tell they're all just crud coated. Then we can lift the bridge, and we want to see if it's the bridge that's frozen. And the bridge is moving, albeit very slowly, but the bridge is moving. And this is the culprit here. It's a frozen situation where the spool gear and the spool shaft have welded on, kind of gotten rusted. So we'll take care of that in just a moment. Right now I'm just pulling the rest of the parts off of this because we want to give this a good soak as well. Free this up, and that's a case where penetrating oil does its job. So we want to put the parts in the tray as much as we can, get the gears off of here. I'll make sure that we're turning okay with this. Now if you want to just replace the spool gear and spool, it's economically a good thing to do, but if this is frozen on the shaft, then the reel's trash. It just I can't even grab it with that. We're going to have to replace this gear sleeve. I just want to make sure that it's not turning by the, I don't mind the turning, but I don't want it turning so what I'm checking for here is to see if the stud that's peened on there is what's turning. So this one, I think we're going to be able to get this one done. So let's go ahead. We're going to pull the dog off. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to hose this down with some penetrating oil. So let's sit for a moment. That should free it up. Eventually we'll pull that off. Let's hit these pieces as well while we're at it. Now you can see why I'm kind of wearing a glove here. There's just a lot of stuff going on here. And then this generally, if you get it wet, you can just kind of wipe it off as I'm doing on this. So this is an extreme case where the reel hasn't been cared for, and you pay the price, right? You have to go replace the parts if you want to make the reel work at all, or in some cases it's beyond repair and it just becomes a parts reel for others. So, but again, it all starts with making sure that you just playing around, a couple of things, trying to talk at the same time here. I want to just see if I can't get this moving with that penetrating oil. I'm just using a little wrench on the flat side of the gear sleeve now. And we'll eventually free this up, so let the penetrating oil do its work. Okay, back to this one. This is the problem here, is that gear sleeve is frozen on there. So I'm not sure it's savable, but what you want to do, again, just like anything else, use that penetrating oil. And then it's time to get a little bold. The only way you're going to remove this thing is to heat it up, because this will expand faster than that will expand, and that'll give you some free. It'll also loosen up any of the rust that's on there. The other thing you want to do, this spool gear has got a slot in the back of it, so there's no way in the world that you can grab pliers and just turn the spool. It won't work. You're going to have to rock the spool back and forth as you pull up. You're not going to want to use a pliers directly on that, because a pliers directly on that will ruin the teeth. So what you're going to want to do is use some padding. I'm just looking for some padding, something like a steel wool here. You're going to put that on top of that before you start moving. That'll cushion the teeth, and you may be able to save that gear. So let's get started with that one then. Show you how this one works. I use a plumber's torch, and we're just going to heat this up. Be careful, it's fire. Fire's hot, it does burn, so know what you're doing. And it doesn't take much. These things are hot. So what I look for is to see that it's bubbling up through the shaft. And that should be plenty. Okay, with that hot then, put that little padding on. In this case we're going to use steel wool as the padding. And then you can grab the steel wool with the pliers and see if you got movement. We do have movement here, which is a good thing. And if you just keep rocking, you'll see I'm turning the spool, just holding. There we go, we got it off. So that's the idea. That's how you get the gear off of this. And then I'm just checking the gear now. I'm going to hit this again with the spray, and I'm going to hit the gear with the spray, because those have been kind of soaked there. And while I get this gear, remember that's hot, I'm just going to take take an awl or a pick or something. And I'm just going to make sure all these channels are clear. Because if they're not clear, then the reel won't work properly. Now, sometimes these can't be saved. We're going to find out when we reassemble. Sometimes these can't be saved, and I think we got that situation here. There's a tooth that's broken here. So this is no good. So what we will do with that is we will replace that, and we'll get back to that in a moment. Let's go over to this one then. This one's rocking. It's moving a little bit. You can see me turning by hand. That has helped. But we want to pull this off completely. In order to do that, you're going to get a pin. I know I have my pin here somewhere. Here it is. I have a pin which is very much similar to the awl. You could probably use both, but this is a smaller diameter. And you're going to knock out the holding pin. It holds this onto the shaft. You can see it coming through here. That's the little pin you're pulling out. You'll see it there. And then what you want to do is you want to work this off. You could put the handle back on. You can use a pliers. And you have a number of things to try and keep working it out. And you'll see the space will come eventually. And what you're doing is just trying to get this off the shaft. And you just need to be patient. You can see it's working itself free now. And the problem we have here now is that it's just been a lot of rust. So use that steel wool that we were using for the pad before. Clean that shaft off. And I use a little flat file, fine file, just to clear the junk off of the bridge. And that's mostly just hardened grease, some rust. These are alloys. I have no idea what it is. It used to be a brass, or at one point going back on the old red-sided ones, it was actually a chrome finished bridge. So you didn't have as much of a problem with this stuff happening, but it does. And unfortunately, that's the state of the art these days. Every manufacturer trying to save a couple of dollars in the manufacturing process, but unfortunately sometimes the product just doesn't last as long as you get into situations like we have here. Alright, just a little bit more on that just to make sure that we've got a smooth operation around that gear sleeve. Clean that up one more time with my paper towel, and we look pretty good there. I'm going to just do the same on the bottom here. There's a little bit of that there, so let's just try and knock that off while we're at it. And I did put some spray in there. We're going to grab a Q-tip now. We're going to run it through the inside of the gear sleeve just to make sure it's clean. In good shape. And then we'll take some blue grease. I'll use the Penn Precision Reel Grease. We'll go ahead and take the grease, put it on the shaft, and reinstall that shaft, the gear sleeve on that shaft. And now you can see we got a free turning pinion gear, which is exactly what we want, our gear sleeve. I'm just looking for the little stud now that holds that in place. And that's the advantage of a parts basket. You can always go back and find that. So put that in, get it set. You can tap it in or not. Sometimes you can just push them in with your fingers. This one seems to require a little bit more. There you go. That's in. Then you want to make sure it clears this shoulder here, because if it doesn't clear the shoulder, then your gears are not going to go back on. Okay, so that's nice and free turning. You come back here and grab the main gear. The main gear is dry, but I'm looking at the drag washers inside of it, and the drag washers are fine. So we don't necessarily need to go replace the drag stack. That wasn't what was causing the reel to stick. Just going to clean that up. Put the last one of these on. Oops. Alright, I got ahead of myself there. I forgot to put the dog back on. Again, another reason why it's good to look in the tray. Just gonna clean some of that dried grease off of there. I'm gonna put the dog on before you put the main gear back in. And then just a drop of oil on the dog. If you put the grease on there, it could accumulate, and if it accumulates, then it's going to dry and it could impact the anti-reverse function. So there you go. We'll put that back on, put the main last of the metal ones on, put the cap on, set that aside. Now we want to do the same thing we did here. It's got a lot of that penetrating oil is leaking off. Time for another clean towel. I use paper towels, they're disposable, and I just find it's convenient. Alright, we've cleaned up the spool. We already did this. We'll do it one more time just for fun. And then we'll go over and reassemble the balance of this this reel. I'll grab that. That goes back in here, but before it goes back in here, we know that we got a bunch of dried lubricants in that. Grab a little bit of the blue grease into the back side plate bearing slot. I know people wonder why I use that screwdriver. It's force of habit. People tell me it sounds like running fingers on a chalkboard. They're probably right. And then just I'm going to put a little bit here because we know we got that frozen before, even though we're going to put a new gear sleeve on. Okay, this was a mess. We let that let the penetrating oil do its thing. I'll come back in now and grab that paper towel. Clean those channels out there. And use we can just see the dried grease chunks here, like that. So this is the reason why I tell folks, service your reel every year, and if you're in heavy usage, do it 3 times a year. Do it at the beginning of the season, about the midpoint of the season, and towards the end of the season, and you shouldn't have any problem. Of course, you know, these folks run their boats to maximize profits, and if that means getting out every day, then there's no time to do that, right? So I understand. I'm not critical of it. I just if you want to learn from best practices, make sure that you keep that well lubricated. Alright, now we're gonna reset our eccentric from the outside, and this one is sprung a little bit when I pushed it through, so I'm just going to grab it. You got to be careful here. Find the midpoint, you can push it in, and you'll be able to reset the arm on the outside. That didn't get it quite enough. I think it sprung back, which it did. Try that again. And we can work that arm back on. Drop of oil inside. Nut back on, and do this by hand to start. Don't use a wrench. You want to make sure that you have it threaded properly. Cross thread one of these, it's tough. Also, if you try to wrench it on, you might knock the arm off of it, and then you're not going to be any good. And then back to my tool here to put the tighten back on that. Just check for operation. We're good. Alright, we want to grab the 2 side springs then that go in those slots. And then I got to get a replacement gear there because we broke the other one. And I should have one in here. I do. Just the fact that I have these kind of suggests that this is not an uncommon problem. But for the most part, I like to try and save these if I can. So there's your new gear. I imagine it's just steel, and as we know, steel rusts to steel if you don't take care of it. So there you go. Alrighty, so I'm just putting a little bit into the teeth here. That'll work its way in. Get the yoke back here, which we cleaned up previously. And we'll put some grease on that so that the gear operates nicely off of that. Those two go on top of the yoke springs. And we lock it down with the jack. And then we can reinstall the bridge. And again, when we saw this the first time, couldn't turn it, and now it turns easily. You see the dog is working, so there's no question this will go back into service. Now this is not a cheap repair in parts. If the reel itself is selling for about $70, that spool gear by itself is about $12. I mean, that's the only piece we needed here, plus labor. But again, you know, it's cheaper than buying a new reel. But, you know, in some cases it just can't even be salvaged at that. Okay, so we've got the bridge set back in then. We're going to use the screws here to tighten down the bridges. And I do an X pattern. I do a front-back kind of a pattern. This one's not seated properly. Use that little centering tool that you have to make sure that you push the yoke into place or the jack out of the way. But you'll tell when it connects. Sometimes if it doesn't connect, turn it over, you'll see where you are, and you can work it from this side. And I'm seeing, although it might be difficult to pick up on camera, I'm seeing that the yoke isn't perfectly centered there. It should be better now. And we're not yet there. Okay, I'm going to loosen up the other one. These have a close tolerance to them, so sometimes if you don't, there you go, we're locked in now. If you don't get it the first time, just back it off until you feel it going correctly. Whatever you do, don't force anything. Okay, so now that we have the 2 points established here, I'm snugging these, but I'm still not tightening them down. I want those other two to get in there before I do that, because of those tolerances. And then this fourth one now should be easy to get in because the others are set, so you should have the holes properly aligned. Now you can finish tightening them up. And we want the ferrule on. Grab that star drag. There's a little bit of junk on there. Now as I'm looking, the star drag has two sides on it. One side has the number, the part number pressed into it, in this case 10505. The other side does not. That part number goes to the inside of the reel. You'll notice on the adjuster nut that there is a rounded section on the top side. So it's just something of note. Okay, we should be spinning now. And we'll go and grab this. There we go. We got a reel that works. So we took a reel that was frozen. It had the spool gear that was frozen on there. We showed you how to heat that to get that off of the spool in an attempt to save it. When we did, we realized that there's a missing tooth here and that the spool gear had to be replaced. So we went ahead and did that. And we've lined this up now. And all that's left to do is install the handle. And we'll be set for another round of fishing there. So the nut on this one is that most reels can be repaired. Some some tricks involved there, right? We found out that the spool was frozen and we didn't want to yank that spool out. We wanted to nurse it out, so we removed all of the pieces on the side plate here so that we took the eccentric off, we took the bridge out, we pushed everything through, and we disassembled it from the back side, giving us the ability to go and work the rest of the reel, and then get at the problem part. Sometimes, like I said, if you pad the spool gear, rock it back and forth. Sometimes the damage hasn't been done yet, sometimes it has. In this case, I suspect what happened was this thing rusted. Somebody tried to crank it, and that'll never work. All right, I'm a little bit off center here in terms of the... There's a little notch there, as you know, for that screw, and if it's not set properly, it won't sit up in it. So that's the Penn JigMaster. That's a very common problem with them. Don't give up on the reel. Like I said, there's the parts in this one, after identifying the problem, is probably about $12, $13. But it's $12 or $13 versus a new reel. Here we go. So versus a new reel, I think this one will go back into service, and it'll be good for who knows how long. As long as you take care of it, it'll be good for a long time. So that's it. So I wanted to show you that trick. If that happens to be your problem, that's the way to solve it. And if you like this thing, please indicate that. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Tell your fishing buddies about it. I would like to increase my subscription basis on this, so let everybody know that there's a channel out there that works on a variety of reels, that shows the average sports enthusiast who likes to fish how to maintain their reels, and in some cases like this, even do some extreme repairs. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.